What's going on, guys? Aarava here. Welcome back to another Let's Talk F1 video, the year-long series where I get to talk about real-life Formula 1, and we're here for the Toro Rosso car launch. Obviously, the Toro Rosso launched this morning, and as you can see on screen, actually, it launched without a livery, because the Toro Rosso team have cited this to be due to the fact that, because they have had to revert to a Ferrari 2015 engine, if you remember, pre-season, at the end of the last season, they thought they were going to go forward with a Renault engine. They still had to find a deal and, work out what they were going to do. Eventually, it was agreed upon that they would get a 2015 Ferrari engine. So they've had to repackage the car, obviously, with it's a different architecture. Each engine manufacturer has a different way of going about things. So they've had to rework the rear end of that car. So they've cited the fact that because the engineers and everyone's just been pushing very hard on this car to try and get it ready for the testing, that they just simply actually haven't had time to paint it up. So we won't know what the actual car will look like definitively, but nonetheless, the kind of plainish bodywork does mean we can look at the car quite detailed, and the Toro Rosso actually this year looks very, very interesting. Actually, to me at least, from what I can see comparing the two, it looks more interesting than the Red Bull this year. It actually has more kind of things going about it that are new and perhaps exciting for the team compared to the Red Bull team. So let me know what you guys think of the look of the car after this video in the comments below, and I want to know your thoughts on the whole dynamic of Toro Rosso and Red Bull, because Horner has stated that the Red Bull car could be behind Toro Rosso for the first half of the season. So I don't know what your opinions are on that. Why do you think maybe Toro Rosso as of late has been a bit ahead of Red Bull sometimes? Because we saw last year at a few races, Toro Rosso were actually legitimately faster than their big sister team Red Bull at a few qualifying sessions and sometimes throughout the race. So let me know what you think of that whole dynamic. But let's jump into this car and look at it. So we've got a nice little shot of the Toro Rosso coming down the pit lane at Barcelona testing. All these pictures are pretty much going to be while the car is out on track or coming out of the pit garage, unlike some of the other car videos I've done where it's been on a kind of white background. But nonetheless, we can have some really good looks at the details of this car. So straight away, the nose at the front is pretty much like last year's, except I feel like they've pushed back the kind of archways on either side of the actual nose tip itself a little bit further back, and it's almost sort of resembling the Red Bull nose in that sense, where it really kind of like an awkward looking arch on either side of the nose tip. And just a little detail, if you look under the nose tip, I've circled it, just a nice little bit of detail of the actual underfloor of that car. Just nice little strakes, not too much to say about it, but I just thought it was quite a nice detail to look at. And also, if you look to the right hand side on the brake ducts, some really nice detailing on two little winglets that come out of the brake ducts, which will obviously help affect the flow going towards the side pod, which, speaking of the side pod, has the usual two vortex generators. We've got the upright that doesn't connect to the side pod, so over the course of the season you may see them add more vortex generators on the top, which affect the airflow and allow the flow to get attached back to the side pod surface, and you might see that upright curve back and attach to the side pod. We've seen that on Ferrari and Haas, which have both kind of extended over the side pod, attached quite early on. The likes of Mercedes actually take this upright and extend it all the way across to the actual driver cockpit kind of sides of the car. So different ways to go about it there, but Toro Rosso with some nice detailing there. You can see above the driver's head, they've got that huge airbox from last year. It's pretty much the exact same as last year. They've got the three sections that they had ever since the launch of last year's car, and that's been their kind of philosophy, to make the airbox a lot bigger so they can really bring in the side pods a lot tighter. Something I thought Mercedes with the W07 with a huge airbox, if you haven't seen that video, that was out yesterday, but Mercedes have debuted a huge airbox. I thought because of that they would have done a Toro Rosso style sort of packaging and really brought in the side pods a lot tighter, but they actually haven't. So it's kind of a nice contrast. You can compare the two teams, Toro Rosso and Mercedes, even though really they're not in the same kind of realm. Mercedes are very much kind of the car to beat right now this season. The Toro Rosso is very much a staple midfield team, but they're getting better and better each single season. So it's kind of nice to be able to draw comparisons between Mercedes and Toro Rosso in that sense. If we then look right where the camera mounts are, you can see I've just drawn a little line there. That is actually an S duct on the Toro Rosso. So the Toro Rosso has a brand new S duct for this car. So kind of like what I said, I think I've said it a few times in the Mclaren video, that the S duct is sort of becoming a trend. Beforehand, last year, even the year before that in 2014, not a lot of teams had it. You had the likes of Red Bull had it in 2014. McLaren had it for the entirety of 2015. So have Sauber. Sauber were actually the first teams to bring in the S duct into Formula 1. And you're seeing now a lot of teams adopting the S duct. Ferrari, we know, have a new top panel on the chassis, so the S duct will come in for Ferrari eventually. McLaren already have one that they've developed. Mercedes are maybe going to do an S duct. They trialed an S duct last year at Brazil, and now we've got Toro Rosso with an actual S duct on their car. If you go towards the side of the car, if you look at just the first few circles around the left front tyre, underneath that 55 of Carlos Sainz, you can see some really nice detailing on the. See a little ridge that's actually coming and extending up from the floor. Really nice piece of detail there that I've not seen on any of the cars apart from the Williams car. So really nice bit of detailing there. And towards the rear left tire there on this picture at least, from our angle from left, you can see some nice detailing on the floor panels that are coming up and that will create vortexes for that rear end of the car to make the diffuser work a lot harder. And also I've circled on the suspension arm. I saw a little winglet there. I thought I saw a little winglet there on the actual suspension arm itself. So nice little details. The Toro Rosso is actually surprisingly quite a nice car to actually look at and analyze. Just some lovely, lovely details around this car. So we move on to this picture of the rear end of the Toro Rosso. You can see on the left-hand side the profile of the side pod. Really nice and swooped down with a little bit of an overhang. Not as much as an overhang as their sister team Red Bull. Red Bull really love a good overhang on the top of their side pod, but Toro Rosso nearly going for that, and they really get tight in on the rear, which we'll see later in a different picture. But if we move to the actual rear end of the car, you can see the usual Mickey Mouse exhaust with the wastegates on the left and the right underneath the main one. And on the actual rear wing itself, you can see some nice detailing. They've got 5 strakes or even 6 strakes on the edge of the rear wing end plate, and then on the beginning of the rear wing end plate, I've circled it on the right hand side, you can see 2 slot gaps, which are a lot like what Red Bull like to run all the time. They ran it quite a lot of last season. They used to revert, actually, when they went to Spa, they would take out the slot gaps because that reduces the drag that you're actually getting on the wing. So we move on to a side picture of the Toro Rosso as it goes down the pit lane. You can see the nice tight packaging as well, but at the same time you can also see where maybe the 2015 Ferrari is hindering them a little bit, because obviously the 2016 Ferrari engine has allowed Ferrari to really close up that engine cover, make it a size 0, much like McLaren's way of packaging things. But the Toro Rosso uses last year's Ferrari. If you remember, last year's Ferrari was wider than this year's, so Toro Rosso have done a good job to really try their best. But you can also see I've drawn that second line on the left-hand side of the car, which kind of cuts the first line of the swooping side pod. That's sort of like an overhang of, I'm guessing, the engine parts of the 2015 Ferrari. So Toro Rosso have tried their best to keep their kind of tight packaging from last year there, but they've had to kind of be almost forced into maybe an overhang, I kind of guess, to make the engine fit properly. I mean, they did have sort of an overhang last year, but that was purely just to improve cooling on the Renault. This overhang, I'm guessing, was probably more of a kind of case in point of, oh, we have to fit the Ferrari engine in here instead of the planned Renault engine that we may have planned over the course of last season. So Toro Rosso is still doing the best they can. And obviously here, actually, I haven't circled it, but right about ahead of the rear tires, you can see those kind of little walls coming up from the floor detailing, really creating a nice vortex effect there. On the next picture, I've zoomed in on the floor from the first picture we looked at, just so you can really see the detailing. Hopefully, it will be a little bit blurry, but hopefully you can see the detailing enough. You can really see the nice detail on the right-hand side. You've got a little ridge with almost 2 little legs coming down onto the actual floor to attach it. As we move on to the overhead picture, you'll be able to see the S duct here. The Toro Rosso car, I must say, looks very odd, very, very odd without the livery here, but it does mean we can clearly see everything. So you got the S duct there. You can also see the nose there pretty much. As I mentioned before at the beginning, I do believe those ridges on either side of the actual nose tip itself have come up a little bit. And the front wing, I haven't really mentioned. The front wing, again, just pretty much like most teams, is basically a derivative of what happened in Abu Dhabi, or pretty much the identical same front wing to what they had at Abu Dhabi. As we move on to the next picture now, we get a chance to see the actual opening for the S duct. If you see the second circle I've done toward just under where the camera mount is, that is where the S duct opening is. If you maybe zoom in on your PC or whatever and try and maybe just squint your eyes, you'll be able to see it. The lighting's not too great, but that is where the opening to the S duct is. It's sort of a very, very, very non-obvious slot for where the S duct is. You know, we've seen McLaren with kind of very, you know, you can see clearly from afar a little bit where the hole is for the S duct opening. We've seen in the past where Red Bull have had a full kind of duct underneath the car to where the S duct air can go in. Here, Toro Rosso have gone for a very, very sleek design, really embedded into that front nose of the chassis where it gets really, really thin on actual depth on that front end, and they've really kind of merged it into the bodywork quite nicely. And then again, you can see the S duct on top. So a few of you mentioned in the comment section of the last day or two what the S duct is, so some of you may not be familiar. It's basically an S-shaped duct that takes air from underneath the car, then swoops up in an S motion up to the top duct. This duct then pushes that air out at quite a concentrated kind of level across the top of the chassis. And what that does is it encourages all the air that's been disconnected from the top of the chassis or above the car to connect back onto the actual chassis surface, because obviously we've got these really low noses, and what that means is any air that kind of hits the nose straight on just gets shot up and gets detached from the top of the chassis. So what the S-duct aims to do is reattach this flow onto the top of the chassis and smoothen it all out. And then finally on this picture you can see confirming that Toro Rosso now also have the blown wheel nuts. Again, I've mentioned it before in other videos, but once again briefly, basically the air goes through the brake duct, doesn't actually touch the brake, goes right through the hub and comes out this hole, cleans up airflow on the outside layer of the car. So a lot of teams opting for the blown wheel nut. Obviously it does have its drawbacks, it does create a bit of drag, so that's why perhaps Mercedes and Force India have not gone for it. So guys, that has been my little analysis of the Toro Rosso here, finishing off with a final picture from a different angle, but pretty much everything I've already stated before. So guys, if you have enjoyed this video, hit that like button, let me know what you thought in the comments below of the Toro Rosso car. Let me know about that dynamic that I mentioned with the whole Red Bull and Toro Rosso situation. Actually, one last thing here, if you look at the back of the side pod, that's the overhang I was talking about. You can clearly see the shape a little bit more, just those kind of, that extra plume tunnel on the very end of the side pod having to come out. That kind of cuts off the actual smoothness of the underside of the side pod. So that's what I was mentioning about before. But yeah, that's been it. That's fully been it now. So if you have enjoyed it, leave a like. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're new around here, then do subscribe for weekly Formula 1 videos. Not just stuff like this. Obviously, if you're new around here and you look around my channel, you'll also see that I do gaming stuff as well. So why not look around and see what you like? I've actually got a gaming video coming up later today so that you can look forward to that. But yeah, guys, I've been aarava. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I will see you guys next time.